In my evaluation, I will be answering 4 questions about the 3 media products which I have created. These were a title sequence for an original children's drama, a magazine front cover, and a DVD case. All these 3 items are interlinked to create a package. The title sequence that I produced used, developed and challenged the forms and conventions of real media products such as Tracy Beaker, The Dumping Ground, My Parents Are Aliens and Grange Hill. It did this through the use of editing that I chose to use, the non-diegetic music in the background, the actors who played the characters, and the camera shots and angles used. One of the main conventions that I chose to use in my title sequence was fast and smooth editing. This is a feature which is present in most of the title sequences that I looked at in my research. Fast editing is a common feature as it makes the title sequence seem upbeat and it catches the attention of a young audience. It also helps to create the atmosphere and set the scene of the drama, and it suggests that the action never stops as the music is fast, which goes alongside the editing. I decided to use this type of editing in my title sequence as it targeted a young audience of around 10 to 15 years old. By using fast editing, it has made my title sequence seem catchy and upbeat. This would make it visually appealing to a young audience because they would not be used to seeing a serious drama. I also used fast editing because it allowed me to keep my title sequence quite simple, which again would help to target a young audience as they would be able to follow the action and understand what was going on. However, the editing that I used did challenge some of the forms and conventions of real media products. This was because my editing sped up quite a lot towards the end, which is uncommon, as most title sequences start to slow down and the music fades out. I decided to do this as it allowed me to show the audience that the programme is going to be full of drama and that it never slows down. The music that was used in the title sequences that I researched, such as Tracy Beaker and Hannah Montana, all had lyrics which suited the storyline of the programme, such as Who Would Have Thought That a Girl Like Me Would Double as a Superstar, which is from Hannah Montana. This gives us an idea about the storyline as it allows us as the audience to see that the character is going to be living a double life. I challenged this convention because I used music which had no lyrics and would be unrecognisable to all audiences. I decided to do this because I felt like it gave an intrigue to the audience. This was because there was no lyrics to give the audience a clue what the programme was going to be about or what was going to happen. As I did this, I had to make sure that the shots and images that I used were effective in portraying the personalities and appearances of the characters. To do this, I used a lot of mid-shots and close-ups as these showed facial expressions and body language well. Another reason that I used unfamiliar music was so that I could use catchy music which would be instantly recognisable to the intended audience after they had seen the programme. I wanted to do this as it would help to establish a brand for my programme, which would in turn help my magazine and DVD case to become recognisable. In the title sequences that I researched, characters were often played by actors who were older than the character they were supposed to be playing. The character of Josh in my title sequence followed this feature as he was 19 years old playing a 16-year-old boy. However, I did challenge this feature when it came to my main character, Lucy. I decided that I would use a 12-year-old girl to play a 12-year-old. This is uncommon in my research of children's TV programme title sequences. However, I did this because I felt like it helped me to announce the realism of the character. I found that it would help to make my title sequence more realistic to the target audience that I was aiming for. This was because they would be used to seeing people their age instead of people who are older than them. Also, in my title sequence research, I found that characters who were supposed to be playing 13-year-olds often looked like 20-year-olds, and I did not think that this was an effective way of targeting a young audience. The camera shots that I used in my title sequence were comparable to the camera shots that were used in my research. I found that the main shots used in the title sequences of programmes such as Tracy Beaker, My Parents Are Aliens and The Dumping Ground were close-ups and mid-shots, and occasionally there were long shots to establish the setting. These title sequences also started and ended with an establishing shot. I used these conventions in my own media product. The main shots that I used were mid-shots and close-ups so that it was clear to see the actions of the character. I did this so the audience would be able to get an idea about the personality of the character. The close-ups that I used allowed me to show facial expressions of the character and that she was a cheeky and mischievous young girl, whereas the mid-shots that I used allowed me to show the outfit that the character was wearing, and this allowed me to show that she was trendy and was wearing the clothes that a typical teenager of that age would wear. I decided that instead of using an establishing shot at the beginning and end of my title sequence, I was going to use the same shot twice. I did this to make it recognisable to my target audience. This was important as it would allow me to familiarise the characters with the audience before the programme had already started. Overall, I feel like my title sequence uses the forms and conventions of real media products well. I think this because I've stuck to the main common features which make my short film look like a title sequence. I also think that when I have challenged or developed the forms and conventions in real media products, that I have done it in a suitable and appropriate way so that it still sticks with the original image of being a title sequence, and I think that I have done this suitably so that I will target the intended audience better. The image content on my magazine uses the forms and conventions of real media products. This is because the image that I have used is a simple image of the main character. This type of image is used on all of the magazines that I've looked at in my research. The image that I have used is a mid-shot which shows my main character looking towards the reader. I have used this pose as it engages the reader through the use of direct address, which again is another common feature in children's magazines. I used direct address because I thought that this would relate well to the text which I had used, which was engaging the reader through the use of questions. However, the colour of the image does challenge forms and conventions of real media products, as my image is on a black and white background with the main character wearing a black and white top. However, I think that this feature works well on my magazine because of the colouring of the font and text. This challenges the forms and conventions of real media products as they are usually all bright and colourful, so the difference is that it attracts the audience's eye as they walk past in the shop. The font on most of the children's magazines that I looked at was basic and simple, so I used this idea and decided to develop it to try and attract a young teenage audience. I developed this by making the font look like it was handwritten in bubble writing and that it was done by a teenager or young child when they were bored. I decided to do this as I thought it would stand out when it was on the magazine stand in the shop. It would do this as it is completely different to typical children's magazines. Even though I developed it in my own way, it still looks like a typical children's magazine because of the colours and images which are used. To target my intended audience appropriately. When looking at my research, I found that the colours which were used on boys' magazines were blues and reds, and the colours used on girls' magazines were pinks and purples. They also tended to be lighter colours when the magazine was trying to target a female audience. These colours are all stereotypical to the audience that they are trying to target, so it was important I use this feature so that it was appealing to my intended audience. However, I did not want to be heavily stereotypical, so I decided that I was going to develop this feature. The colours that I used on my magazines were purples and turquoise colours. I decided that I was going to use these colours as the purple is a feminine colour, so it would appeal to the female audience. However, I also used a turquoise colour so that I was not singling out a male audience if they would like to read the magazine. This turquoise colour would also fit with the background of the bedroom where I did my filming, which would help to establish my magazine as people would relate the colours on the magazine to the programme. This is not a common feature in most magazines because they usually only target one gender. However, I decided that I did not want to do this because my magazine features a secondary character which would be the same age as the audience who would watch the programme. Overall, I think that my magazine uses the forms and conventions of a typical children's magazine well. This is because I have used the most common features and developed them so that they suit my magazine. I think the overall impact of my magazine is effective because I've used the appropriate colours and the image is bold and stands out above the text even though it is positioned underneath the text. The DVD case that I created uses the same forms and conventions of a real DVD case. This is because I have used the BBFC classification on all sides. I have had to do this because it is a legal requirement which needs to be on all DVD cases sold in the UK and Ireland. I decided that I was going to give my DVD the classification of a PG. I did this because of the nature of some of the subjects that are featured in my DVD may be sensitive to some of the children. For example, the main character Lucy is just starting high school and she has a lot of problems to overcome, such as finding her way around the new school and making new friends. For this reason, I decided that my DVD would best suit a PG instead of a U or a 12. The image content on my DVD case follows the forms and conventions of a real DVD case. This is because it matches what is found on real media products. I have used the feature of having images from the programme on the back of the DVD case. These images are positioned around the summary of the programme on the back of the case. I did this as it is a typical feature and the images will become familiar to a young audience and they will be able to tell which episodes are on the DVD. The main image on the DVD case is on the front cover. This image is a still posed image of the main character. I decided to use this sort of image on the front cover as it is visually appealing to a young audience, as they will see the main character as being a role model. The image again uses direct address, just like it did on my magazine front cover. This is to engage the viewer and to lure them in. The text on the back of my DVD was engaging to the reader and used simple and basic language. For example, the blurb says, "This series of the life of me follows the main character Lucy as she faces her first days in high school." This language is easy to understand and all audiences would be able to read it. I did this so that it was appealing to a young audience and they would be able to tell what is going to be on the DVD. This sort of text is common on DVD cases as it gives a brief description as to what is included on the DVD. This information is important to the parent and the child. A final feature which I used is including a free or extra item on my DVD case. I did this as I found it was present on most DVDs which were aimed at children, and I used this feature which would attract a younger audience as they will feel like they are getting something exclusive. This exclusiveness will attract a young audience as it gives them the feeling that it will never be seen again or it has never been seen before. This feature is often put on DVDs and aimed at the parents who will be purchasing it, as they will see it as an incentive to buy.